30 FBI agents burst from the dark to arrest one of their own. He had spent 22 years feeding Moscow secrets while working inside the bureau built to stop spies. The drop was a black garbage bag taped beneath a bridge. When the floodlights hit, he didn't run. He sounded almost relieved. Then he asked, "What took you so long?" And everything changed. Why had the FBI's most trusted hunter become the danger inside it? Robert Philip Hanssen joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1976. He was 32 years old, a former Chicago police officer's son with a degree in accounting and an MBA. He was not flashy, he was not charming, he was the kind of man who could sit in a meeting for an hour and leave no one remembering he'd been there. The Bureau posted him to Gary, Indiana, white-collar crime, then transferred him to New York, to the counterintelligence squad. It was the late 1970s. The Cold War was at full temperature. Soviet intelligence operatives honeycombed New York and Washington. And the FBI's job was to find them, track them, and, when possible, turn them. Hanssen was good at the work, methodical, detail-oriented, quiet. But underneath the quiet was something acidic. He applied for a supervisory promotion in New York. Denied. He submitted a proposal for a new database system to track Soviet intelligence operations. Ignored. He watched younger agents with better social skills and worse analytical minds advance past him, and the resentment calcified into something cold and permanent. He prayed the rosary every morning. He attended Mass every Sunday. And in 1979, 3 years into his career at the FBI, Robert Hanssen walked into the offices of the GRU, Soviet military intelligence in New York City. He didn't defect. He didn't ask for asylum. He did something far more valuable. He volunteered.
I can give you names. I can give you operations. And I want to be compensated.
His first gift to Soviet intelligence was devastating. He revealed the identity of Dmitry Polyakov, a Soviet general who had been secretly working for American intelligence for nearly 2 decades. Polyakov, codenamed Tofat, was considered one of the most valuable intelligence assets the United States had ever cultivated. He had provided critical insights into Soviet military strategy, nuclear capabilities, and internal Kremlin politics. Hanssen gave him up for cash. Polyakov would eventually be recalled to Moscow, arrested and executed by firing squad in March 1988. Both Hanssen and CIA officer Aldrich Ames would independently compromise Polyakov, a double betrayal that sealed his fate. One letter across a desk, and a man who had risked everything for the United States was dead. But Hanssen's first brush with consequences came not from Soviet intelligence or the FBI. It came from his wife. In 1980, Bonnie Hanssen walked into the basement of their home and found her husband hunched over a desk, writing a letter. Not a personal letter, a letter to the Soviets.
Robert, what is this?
He confessed, partially. He told her he had passed some information to the Russians, but that it was only low-level material. He swore he would stop. Together, they went to Father Robert Bucciarelli, an Opus Dei priest who counseled Hanssen to cease all contact with the Soviets and donate the money to charity. Robert Hanssen told his wife he was done. He told his priest he was done. He waited 3 years. Then he started again. And this time, he went directly to the most dangerous intelligence service on Earth. On October 1st, 1985, the KGB residency in Washington received an anonymous letter. It was mailed through the regular U.S. Postal Service. No diplomatic pouch, no dead drop, no covert channel. Just a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a bombshell. The letter identified 3 KGB officers who were secretly working as double agents for the FBI. The anonymous author, who signed with the self-chosen alias Ramon Garcia, provided enough operational detail that the KGB knew the information was genuine. This wasn't a provocation. This was the real thing.
The quality of the intelligence was extraordinary. Whoever this source was, they had access to the most sensitive counterintelligence operations in the United States.
Viktor Cherkashin, a senior KGB officer at the Washington residency, processed the letter. The KGB immediately began verifying the names. Within months, 2 of the 3 compromised agents were recalled to Moscow. At least 2 were subsequently executed. The human cost of Hanssen's second act of treachery was stark. These were men with families, intelligence officers who had made the dangerous decision to work secretly for the United States because they believed in something larger than the Soviet system. Their identities were Hanssen's currency. He spent them without hesitation. But what made Hanssen uniquely dangerous, what separated him from every other spy in American history, was his tradecraft. He never met his handlers face to face. After the initial GRU contact in 1979, Hanssen communicated with Russian intelligence exclusively through dead drops, a system of concealed exchange points in parks across northern Virginia. He would package classified documents in black garbage bags, tape them beneath bridges or inside hollow trees, and apply adhesive tape to a specific park sign to signal that a drop was ready. The KGB would retrieve the package and leave cash at a separate location. No meetings, no phone calls, no surveillance trail. The system was elegant in its simplicity and nearly impossible to detect. Over the years, the KGB paid Hanssen more than $600,000 in cash delivered through the same dead drop network, plus an additional $800,000 deposited in a Russian bank account. Diamonds, too. The total exceeded $1.4 million. But here was the detail that made Hanssen invisible. He never changed his lifestyle. He drove the same modest car. He lived in the same middle-class house in Vienna, Virginia. He sent his children to Catholic schools and attended Mass every Sunday. Compare this to Aldrich Ames, the CIA officer who would be arrested for Soviet espionage in 1994, who celebrated his treason by purchasing a $540,000 house in cash and a red Jaguar. Ames was caught in part because his spending didn't match his salary. Hanssen was smarter than that. Hanssen was invisible. The KGB had something it had never had before, a source inside the FBI who produced at the highest classification level. Never appeared at any meeting, never lived beyond his means, and never aroused suspicion. And then the FBI did something that made Robert Hanssen the most dangerous man in American intelligence. They promoted him. The FBI's Soviet analytical unit sat at the heart of the Bureau's counterintelligence infrastructure. Its job was to analyze Soviet intelligence operations against the United States, to study patterns, identify vulnerabilities, and hunt for moles inside the American intelligence community. In 1987, the FBI assigned Robert Hanssen to this unit.
He was sitting in the center of the operation that was designed to find him, and we gave him a desk.
The irony was operationally catastrophic. Hanssen now had access to the FBI's most compartmented counterintelligence files, including files about the very investigation trying to identify whoever was leaking secrets to Moscow. He could read the progress reports, he could assess whether they were getting close, and when they got too close, he could steer them away. He used this access to commit what many consider his single most damaging act of espionage. The FBI had spent an estimated $800 million building a secret tunnel beneath the Soviet embassy on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington. The tunnel was packed with sophisticated listening devices designed to intercept Soviet communications from inside the embassy itself. It was one of the most ambitious technical intelligence operations in American history. Hanssen told the KGB everything: the tunnel's location, its capabilities, its access points. Overnight, the Soviets began feeding carefully crafted disinformation through the very channels the FBI was monitoring, turning America's greatest intelligence asset into a conduit for Russian lies. Hundreds of millions of dollars, years of engineering, decades of planning, all rendered worthless by one man who worked 3 floors above the operations oversight office. And the warning signs were there. They just went unheeded. Around 1990, Mark Walk, an FBI agent married to Hanssen's sister, visited Robert's home and noticed something troubling. Thousands of dollars in cash, stacked in places it shouldn't have been. Walk knew what an FBI agent's salary looked like. This wasn't it.
Something isn't right. I don't know where he's getting this money.
The supervisor took notes, filed a report, and nothing happened. No investigation was opened, no questions were asked. A colleague in Washington noticed something equally troubling. Hanssen was accessing the FBI's internal database in ways that suggested he was checking whether his own name appeared in any active investigation. He was searching for himself. The colleague flagged it to his supervisor. Nothing happened.
We assumed our mole problem was at CIA. We never seriously looked at our own people.
Then, in February 1994, the FBI arrested Aldrich Ames. Ames was a CIA counterintelligence officer who had been spying for the KGB since 1985. His arrest was treated as the definitive answer to the question that had haunted American intelligence for years: who was the mole? The FBI breathed a collective sigh of relief. The leak had been found. The problem was solved. Except it wasn't. Classified information continued to flow to Moscow even after Ames was behind bars. Someone else was still operating, but the FBI was in no mood to investigate itself. The institutional assumption, comforting, dangerous, and wrong, was that Ames had been the only problem. Robert Hanssen kept spying for 7 more years. By the late 1990s, the hemorrhage of classified information was impossible to ignore. Intelligence operations were being compromised that Aldrich Ames could not have known about. Sources were going silent. Programs were being detected. Someone, was still active inside the American intelligence community. The FBI launched a new investigation. This time, they looked inward. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In 2000, the FBI made contact with a former KGB officer. He had access to Russian intelligence's most closely guarded secret, the identity of their best American source. He was willing to sell. The price, $7 million. The Bureau paid. The file arrived. It was thick. Decades of correspondence, operational details, classified documents that had been passed to the Russians. But there was no name. The anonymous spy had been meticulous about never revealing his true identity to his handlers. There was, however, a recording. On the tape, the anonymous agent was speaking with his KGB contact. The conversation was operational, dry, clinical, procedural, but the voice was distinctive. FBI analysts played it, and played it again.
We played the tape, and I knew that voice. I'd heard it in meetings, in the hallways. It was one of us.
The voice belonged to Robert Hanssen. Now the FBI had a name, but they didn't have proof of active espionage. A voice on a decades-old tape wasn't enough for a conviction. They needed to catch him in the act. In January 2001, the FBI transferred Hanssen to a new position at the State Department's Office of Foreign Missions. A routine-looking reassignment that was anything but. They assigned him a new assistant, a young FBI operative named Eric O'Neill. O'Neill was in his late 20s, sharp, observant, and completely unprepared for what came next. His mission was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Work as Hanssen's right-hand man, watch his every move, and find evidence that he was still communicating with Russian intelligence.
They told me my new boss might be a Russian spy. I thought they were joking. Then I met him and I realized this was the most paranoid man I'd ever been in a room with.
Hanssen was meticulous about security. He swept his office for listening devices, something no ordinary FBI supervisor would think to do. He spoke in clipped sentences, revealing nothing personal, and he was obsessive about his Palm Pilot, a personal digital assistant that he carried everywhere and never, under any circumstances, left unattended. O'Neill noticed. Every day he cataloged Hanssen's habits. The times he arrived, the routes he drove, the phone calls he made, and always the Palm Pilot. Working with the FBI technical team, O'Neill engineered a distraction, a pretext compelling enough to pull Hanssen out of his office. During a narrow window when technicians could access his Palm Pilot and clone its contents, the operation required precision measured in minutes. If Hanssen noticed anything out of place, the Palm Pilot at a slightly wrong angle, a desk drawer not fully closed, he would know. A man who had spent 22 years evading the most powerful intelligence apparatus on Earth did not miss details like that. The operation worked. The Palm Pilot's data confirmed what the FBI feared. Hanssen was still in contact with Russian intelligence. He was still using the dead drop system. He was still operational. Now the FBI surveillance teams moved in. They followed Hanssen's car to park locations that matched the dead drop sites. They watched him apply adhesive tape to a post in Foxstone Park, a prearranged signal. They photographed him carrying packages into the woods. The pattern was unmistakable. All they needed now was one more drop. February 18, 2001 was a Sunday. Robert Hanssen attended Mass that morning, as he did every Sunday. Then he drove to Foxstone Park. The temperature was below freezing. The sun was already low, throwing long shadows through the leafless trees. Robert Hanssen parked his Ford Taurus along the access road and stepped out into the cold. In a black garbage bag on the passenger seat, a package of classified documents and an encrypted computer disk. Material that Russian intelligence had been receiving from this man for 22 years. He picked up the bag. He walked into the park. 30 FBI agents were already in position. They were in unmarked vehicles along every road leading to the park, crouched behind trees with binoculars on the rooftops of nearby houses. 2 surveillance aircraft circled overhead at altitude, invisible in the darkening sky. Hanssen reached the footbridge. He knelt beneath it. The same motion he had performed dozens of times over 2 decades. He pulled out the tape, fixed the garbage bag to the wooden support beam, stood up, and began walking back toward his car.
Subject has made the drop. All units, move to intercept.
They came from behind the trees, from the vehicles, from the path ahead and behind. The park, empty a moment ago, was suddenly full of people in tactical gear, all of them focused on one man in a dark overcoat. Hanssen stopped. He did not reach into his coat. He did not attempt to run. He looked at the agents, men and women who worked for the same bureau he had served for 25 years, and his body seemed to deflate. His hands went up.
What took you so long?
4 words that would echo through the halls of American intelligence for decades. Were they a taunt, the arrogance of a man who had operated in plain sight for 22 years? Were they relief, the exhale of someone who had been waiting for this moment since 1979? Or were they a genuine question from a man who always believed the FBI would eventually figure it out? Hanssen never explained what he meant. The evidence team recovered the garbage bag from beneath the bridge. Inside, classified documents and an encrypted disk intended for Russian intelligence. They photographed the scene, the bridge, the tape, the bag. The same footbridge Hanssen had used for years, a 10-minute drive from his suburban home where his wife was preparing dinner and his children were doing homework. Robert Hanssen was placed in handcuffs, put in the back of an FBI vehicle, and driven away from Foxstone Park for the last time. The courtroom was packed. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, intelligence officials, reporters. All gathered for what would be the final chapter of the worst espionage case in FBI history. Robert Hanssen stood before the judge. He had spent the months since his arrest in solitary confinement, undergoing extensive debriefings with FBI and intelligence community interrogators. As part of his plea agreement, he would reveal the full scope of his espionage in exchange for one thing: his life.
The court sentences you to 15 consecutive terms of life imprisonment. There will be no possibility of parole.
Hanssen did not react. The death penalty was off the table. In return, Hanssen submitted to hundreds of hours of debriefings, answering questions about every dead drop, every document, every compromised operation. The damage assessment took years to compile. When it was finished, the numbers were staggering. Over 22 years, Hanssen had given the Soviet Union and Russia more than 6,000 pages of classified documents and 27 computer diskettes, containing some of the most sensitive intelligence in the United States government. He had exposed the identities of intelligence assets, at least 3 of whom were subsequently executed, including Dmitry Polyakov. He had revealed the existence of the tunnel beneath the Soviet embassy. He had compromised details of U.S. nuclear war strategy, continuity of government plans, and the technical methods used by the FBI and NSA to monitor foreign intelligence operations. Some of the material he provided remains classified to this day. Some of the damage has never been fully assessed. The Department of Justice launched an investigation into how Hanssen had operated undetected for so long. The resulting report was a devastating indictment of the Bureau's internal security culture. the FBI's internal security programs were fundamentally inadequate. For decades, the Bureau operated on the assumption that its agents were inherently trustworthy. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. FBI agents had not been routinely subjected to polygraph examinations, a standard practice at the CIA. Internal computer systems were barely monitored for unauthorized access. The culture of trust that defined the FBI, the belief that those who enforced the law could not possibly break it, was the blind spot that made Hanssen's career as a spy possible. After the Hanssen case, the FBI implemented sweeping security reforms, mandatory polygraphs, computer monitoring, a new internal security division. The reforms came 22 years too late. Robert Hanssen was sent to ADX Florence, the federal administrative maximum facility in Florence, Colorado. The most secure prison in the United States. Its inmates include terrorists, drug lords, and spies. Hanssen was placed in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell with a single slit window. 1 hour outside the cell, no contact visits, no phone calls, just concrete, fluorescent light, and silence. He spent 22 years in that silence, the same amount of time he had spent betraying his country. On June 5, 2023, Robert Philip Hanssen was found unresponsive in his cell. He was pronounced dead. He was 79 years old. When the FBI asked him why he had done it, Hanssen never gave a single satisfying answer. He cited money, he cited ego, he cited a belief that he would never be caught. He spoke about the intellectual challenge of operating undetected, the thrill of a game played against the most powerful intelligence apparatus on Earth. But those answers were surface explanations. The deeper truth was simpler and more human than any of them. Robert Hanssen's greatest fear was never getting caught. It was being seen for exactly what he was without the secret. An ordinary man in a gray office, passed over for promotion, invisible at meetings, indistinguishable from anyone else in the building. The espionage made him extraordinary. The dead drops, the million-dollar payoffs, the knowledge that he alone held the fate of nations in a black garbage bag. That was the thing that made Robert Hanssen feel like someone who mattered. The secret made him extraordinary, and the secret destroyed him. The question that haunted the FBI for 2 decades still has no good answer. How does the world's premier law enforcement agency fail to notice that the spy it's hunting sits 3 desks away?